to say, I don't know why everybody's here. Nobody's going to be listening to this hearing come half hour from now.
And if Hal's here, that means that, West Virginia's in recession. He and Evan are going to tag team this thing.
Morning. How you doing? There you go, man. You can lobby him right there.
You can arm wrestle.
Yeah. Don't get in a knife fight with a seal. Okay. Getting everybody in here. I was just waiting for everybody to sit down real quick.
My other hearing,
What's the other here?
CFTC, I mean ag, but
Yeah.
consumer, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, whatever.
Cocan skipped the last hearing. I'm like, Cocan, you can do whatever you want to do today, okay?
Great job.
If everybody can grab a seat, we're going to get going here in about 30 seconds.
We're in trouble.
Yeah. Committee will come to order, and we want to welcome everybody here. We're the only folks in town not watching the Comey show, so good morning. And I'd like to welcome to the subcommittee the 52nd Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke. Joining the Secretary this morning is Olivia Berreter, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Budget, Finance, Performance, and Acquisition, as well as Denise Flanagan, Director, Office of Budget. Our hearing today will address the fiscal year 2018 budget priorities for the Department of Interior. Mr. Secretary, this is your first formal budget hearing before our subcommittee. On behalf of our members, congratulations on your confirmation and welcome back to the House. We look forward to outlining your goals for the department, discussing a variety of important issues with us this morning. Having worked alongside you here in Congress and knowing of your passion for the outdoors and recreation, I look forward to working with you to address the many challenges facing the department. As a native Montanan and a Westerner, you have a deep understanding of and bring a welcome perspective to many of these issues. Our challenges are diverse and many, addressing the maintenance backlog in our national parks, and across the various interior bureaus, adequately funding fire suppression, meeting our legal and moral obligations throughout Indian country, funding PILT, and complex water issues affecting the West and my own state of California. These are some of the very tough challenges. We stand ready to roll up our sleeves, work with you, and to seek solutions to these and other issues. This morning's hearing marks the beginning of a very candid conversation about your department's funding priorities. Overall, the President's fiscal year 2018 budget request provides $10.6 billion in discretionary funding for the Department of Interior programs under the subcommittee's jurisdiction, which is $1.6 billion or 13% below fiscal year 2017 enacted level. At the outset, let me state the obvious. This is going to be a very challenging year. The President has presented a budget proposal that will be closely examined, account by account, line by line. The budget request for your department may not be exactly what you would have proposed, but ultimately Congress will have the final say over the fiscal year 2018 budget. This subcommittee is committed to moving the Interior bill quickly. We will complete our work. In bipartisan fashion, under both Republican and Democratic chairmen, this subcommittee has made a concerted effort to address the greatest needs in Indian country. Education, health care, and law enforcement issues continue to be a nonpartisan subcommittee priority. We welcome your active involvement working with us and our American Indian and Alaskan Native brothers and sisters. The challenge of providing adequate wildfire funding remains one of the great challenges facing this subcommittee. I want to applaud my good friend Mike Simpson for his leadership and continuing efforts to address this issue through his bipartisan legislation, which, by the way, is being introduced, I think, in the House today. Right? I'd encourage you, Mr. Secretary, to lend your voice to supporting the Simpson bill, as you did while you were serving in the House, and encourage the President to do the same. Another challenge facing the Department and the subcommittee is the Endangered Species Act. The ESA is a well-intentioned statute that has saved numerous species from extinction, but its authorization has long expired. It's critical that we have open, realistic discussions in Congress about what is working and what is not. Like many from the West, I welcome the Department's review of the authority under the Antiquities Act for designating national monuments. As you know from your travels, there is great concern that these designations often disregard the views and concerns of affected communities, local stakeholders, and the representatives of Congress. Identifying stable long-term funding for payments in lieu of taxes, PILT, is another major challenge. Until a solution is identified, funding PILT is going to continue putting pressure on program budgets with the department across our agencies within this bill. The National Park Service recently celebrated its centennial. In the fiscal year 2017 enacted budget, the subcommittee made a substantial investment in our national park by providing additional funds for park operations, addressing longstanding deferred maintenance issues, and we certainly look forward to working with you to ensure that these national treasures are adequately funded and seek avenues to reduce the longstanding maintenance backlog. Lastly, I'm glad to see that the USGS budget includes full funding for Landsat 9 core mission areas, including energy and minerals, and mapping are mostly spared. That said, I'm concerned that some programs might have been too hastily proposed for termination. The West Coast, and my home state of California in particular, is counting on the federal government and their expertise of the USGS to make earthquake early warning systems operational. This is a public safety program that will protect millions of lives and critical infrastructure. So this subcommittee will be taking a close look at the program and how we can keep its momentum going as we consider fiscal year 2018 funding. In closing, I want to express my appreciation to your outstanding professional staff. Our subcommittee couldn't do its work without your budget shop, the various bureaus, and talented people sitting next to you and behind you. Thanks to each of you for all you do. And with that, I'm happy to yield to the gentlelady from Minnesota, Mrs. McCollum, for any opening remarks you would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the courtesy of the opening remarks. And I would like to just reiterate, Mr. Chairman, I think many, if not everything, pretty much that you said in your opening remarks, you have my support to work on those issues together with you. Mr. Zinke, thank you for being here with us today. Mr. Secretary, I know this budget was kind of put together before you had an opportunity to have a full imprint on it, and so I know that there's lots of room and where we can have discussions and work forward. But I want to begin by saying how profoundly disappointed I am that President Trump is withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. His decision harms the health of our children and grandchildren. It jeopardizes the environment that we will leave them. This administration's willful denial of threats of climate change is reflected in the Department of Interior's budget, which cuts funding for climate change research and mitigation by an appalling 80% cut to climate change research and mitigation. The department manages hundreds of millions of acres of America's most precious land and resources. Despite this tremendously important responsibility, President Trump's 2018 budget cuts the Department of Interior by $1.16 billion, or 13%. After we adjust that for inflation, we are well below 2010 levels of spending. This proposal contained in President Trump's budget, I believe, are reckless. They're reckless and they endanger our natural and cultural resources. This budget guts funding for programs critical to appropriately manage our public lands. It dishonors our commitment to Native Americans, and it rejects science. Sadly, this budget advances an agenda that puts profits of oil companies above the public good. There is a place for responsible oil, gas, and development on our public lands, but it must be balanced and it must be sustainable. This budget abandons the department's conservation responsibilities. The administration has already begun to reverse critical environmental policies, such as those that limit offshore drilling, a moratorium on coal mining leases, and the control of methane venting from drilling operations. These policies were carefully developed through scientific and public processes, but the administration would rather ignore the science and the public opinion. The administration also proposes significant reductions to Indian programs. The Department Bureau of Indian Affairs and Education is responsible for enhancing social and economic well-being of Native Americans. This budget ignores that obligation and cuts Indian programs by $372 million, or 13%. In particular, the department's decision to eliminate the Twahi Initiative's investments in family supports will devastate tribes like the one in Red Lake Nation in Minnesota. The Red Lake Nation has used the funding to open their Children's Healing Center and to stop an epidemic of suicide on their reservation. This is a successful pilot project, and we should be expanding it, not eliminating it. The budget request stalls the progress that we are making as a committee to replace BIE schools. The United States has an obligation to protect tribal treaty rights and resources, and I find it disgraceful that the administration budgets turns its back on this duty. I am proud and grateful that the funding for Native American issues has been an area of bipartisan cooperation, and I'll go as far to say on this committee, nonpartisan cooperation, and I fully expect that we will continue our commitment to work together for the good of Indian country. The department's science programs that provide data and tools for information, sound decisions making to address the complex challenges such as drought, natural hazards, and climate change is short-sighted, and it's irresponsible to cut programs that provide advanced warning protections to protect life, health, and property of millions of Americans, as proposed with the elimination of the $10 million for the nation's early warning earthquake system. We can all agree that a strong America is one where we protect our natural resources for future generations. Being good stewards of those resources requires a robust investment in both resource management and the staffing to carry it out. The staffing reductions proposed in this budget and the long-term workforce reduction plan that you are developing do not provide any assurance that you will be able to properly execute your duties and responsibilities in this Department of Interior. The budget is unacceptable, and I expect my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to reject it. The Interior Department and the American people deserve a budget that reflects the economic and recreational opportunities, the environmental benefits that the Interior programs have on the lives of all Americans, especially their health and economic prosperity. I'm going to make my position very clear. I will not support an interior environment bill that appropriates less than our current 2017 FYI level. I pledge to work with my colleagues in Congress and you, Secretary Zinke, to ensure that the Department of Interior has the necessary funding so our national
Because many happy returns of the day to you, Mr. Chairman, on your birthday.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you can give a round of applause.
It's good to have him. I know that.
I also want to welcome Secretary Ryan Zinke to the Appropriations Committee, and while it's your first time before the committee, we welcome you back as a former colleague. Today's hearing is an important part of the oversight duties of this committee. Now that we have formally received the administration's budget requests, the committee will undertake a thorough analysis of it. We'll go through each and every budget line, question witnesses, and demand credible spending justifications, and only then will we make our own determinations on the best use of tax dollars. When I travel around my congressional district in New Jersey, the Department of Interior's strong presence cannot be missed. We have the nation's first historical park, founded in 1933 in Morristown. We also have the most remarkable Thomas Edison National Historic Park in West Orange, and acknowledge his contribution to this nation's research and development. I also have in my congressional district the Great Swamp Wildlife Refuge, and if I may just take a personal note, by an act of Congress proposed by my late father, this is a remarkable open space, the largest such refuge and swamp other than the Okefenokee on the East Coast. So when I look at your budget, I obviously I share the nation's concerns about where we're going in terms of spending, but I'm also concerned about some of the cuts that are being made across the National Park Service and Fish and Wildlife Service. And I look forward to hearing from you rationale for including them. And may I say on another note, there are oftentimes differences between the East and the West and the Western Caucasus, but in our neck of the woods on the East Coast, we're awfully proud of the work of the Department of Interior, and we salute the activities of the men and women who provide such incredible services interpreting those types of histories to future generations. So look forward to working with you, and I want to thank Chairman Calvert for his leadership, and look forward to working with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also pleased to see our ranking member of the full committee, Mrs. Lowy, is here today. I'm happy to yield to the gentlelady for any opening remarks she would like to make.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Chairman Calvert and wish him a happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Ranking Member McCullum for holding this hearing, and I join you in welcoming Secretary Zinke before the subcommittee. Secretary Zinke, your department is charged with protecting and managing our nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. Despite responsibility for preserving American land, water, and wildlife, from the gates of the Arctic and Alaska to the Virgin Islands National Park and everywhere in between, your budget proposal abandons your department's critical mission. During your confirmation, you stated you would dedicate yourself to a conservation and protect our national parks. But a report from last month found that Glacier National Park's glaciers are rapidly disappearing, shrinking an average of 39% over the past 50 years. Some have shrunk by as much as 85% over the same time. One of our most prized natural resources is melting before our eyes. By ignoring the threat of climate change, this administration, it's breaking its promise to protect American lands for generations to come. The science is conclusive. Human activity is contributing to a change in the world's climatic patterns. As average temperatures and sea levels rise and weather becomes more extreme, our natural resources face an increasing risk. These facts demand action, and your department's budget request is wholly inadequate to address the dangers presented by climate change. Decreases to the department of $1.6 billion, or 13%, would render it incapable of meeting our federal responsibilities. Misguided policy proposals would further endanger American lands by allowing oil and gas leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and expanding offshore drilling along the Atlantic coast and the waters around Alaska. In addition to being critical to our national security, Arctic waters are home to endangered species and diverse ecosystems. Any oil spills in the Arctic would be disastrous for the region, and our ability to clean up a spill in the region's harsh weather and light conditions is limited. The fiscal year 18 request for the Department of the Interior shortchanges the American people by failing to provide adequate resources to preserve our nation's cultural heritage and public lands, while padding the pockets of the oil and gas industry. Your priorities, in my judgment, are just wrong. It is my hope that Congress will reject the President's budget request and instead pass a spending bill that invests in America, addresses climate change, and moves us forward in the 21st century economy. I must say, Mr. Secretary, that this committee has always worked in a bipartisan way, and although we have some differences, in the end, we produced some pretty good bills. So I just want to say I look forward to working with you, and as harsh as my statement may seem, I'm optimistic that we can get together because the issues are so critical, and we have to move forward together, Democrats and Republicans, to protect our nation and our nation's heritage. Thank you very much.
I thank the gentlelady for her statement. With that, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Member Rankin. Thank you for allowing me to testify. And if I can, I'll request permission to submit my entire statement into the record. The budget. The President has delivered a responsible plan to put America back on track for a balanced budget in 2027. This is what a balanced budget looks like. As a secretary, I look at it as a starting point. Everyone talks about balancing a budget, but this is what a balanced budget would look like, and it has some very difficult decisions along the way. Not all these decisions we agree on, but this is what a balanced budget would look like. And I fully understand the Department of Interior touches more lives than any other department. I fully understand the obligation of being a steward of our greatest lands, 12 time zones, 330 million visitors pass through our parks, and yes, parks do create jobs. The President's overall budget proposes about $11.7 billion and saves the taxpayers about $1.6 on it. But it does also prioritize America's energy independence. With an all-the-above strategy, we do not value oil and gas over alternative energies, but all the above is a prudent focus. And let me give you an extent when we talk about the budget. If you go back to 2008, we made about $18 billion in offshore alone. That was our revenue per year. Last year, we made $2.6 billion. That's a drop of $15.5 billion a year in revenue. So when I'm faced with a $11.5 billion deficit in maintenance and backlog of our parks, about half of that is roads, and the 11.5 in the parks represents about 73% of our total backlog in maintenance and repair. Dropping $15.5 billion a year, we would have caught up our entire backlog of maintenance in 1 year and had $3 billion to invest in new infrastructure and capitalization. That's the scale of what has occurred. And when you add timber and onshore and the reduction of that, the balance sheet gets worse. One of the first acts I've done is I've looked at revenues. I formed a committee to look at revenues across the board because I'm concerned that we're not getting value. And the revenues, if you're going to do a commercial enterprise at all on public lands, we're all stakeholders. And I want to make sure that how we gain rents and royalties is transparent, as it should be. It should be fair. The rules should not be arbitrary, and it should be in the best interest of the public, because the public owns our public lands. When it comes to infrastructure, we plan on taking care of what we have. A reduction in LWCF, which I've always supported. That reduction simply is no more land acquisition, at least in the budget as presented, but we're going to take care of what we have. I'm concerned, as you are, in infrastructure. And if you want to look at an example of our infrastructure, I invite you to go to Arlington. Arlington is hollow ground. It is a national disgrace what has occurred with Arlington. The shutters need to be replaced. The foundation is leaning. The gardens are inappropriate. And that reflects where we are on our infrastructure across, and that's hollow ground. The budget calls for a $35 million increase for a total of $766 million for national park infrastructure. Even though the budget is tight, we increased it. And that includes also an $18 million for the first phase matching grant, the Department of Transportation, for the Memorial Bridge. The Memorial Bridge project alone is $262 million. And as secretary, I was amazed at what I owned and what I didn't own. But of the $11.5 billion, about half are roads. And about a third of those roads really aren't in parks. They're parkways, like the George Washington Parkway, like the road out to Baltimore, which are really transportation hubs, vice, a park asset, as most Americans would understand it, but yet I'm responsible for it. And believe me, if there's a chuck hole, I hear about it. We also, on PILT, last budget, as I recall from the Congress, it was not included in discretionary at all. So I remember the conversation of going out and having to hunt and find money for PILT. This time we did put $397 million in for PILT. So if PILT is fully funded, you won't have to find so much. But we did include that in the budget. We also supported Indian trust responsibilities with a focus on, and I've said this many times, with self-government, self-determination, sovereignty. On Indian education, we spend about $15,000 per student. That's in comparison to about 9 or so off reservation, and the results are far worse. So we have to have a candid discussion on how to provide better service for Indian education. And it's the same across the board with Indian health. I've seen it. I've stood in line with people that are waiting for health care, knowing that they're only going to see 20 and the line's 50, and they're going to come back day after day after day. So we have to have a candid discussion about what service we provide and how to do it better, because quite frankly, and I think we are failing on Indian health, we are failing on Indian education. And more money may not be the answer, but we need to have a conversation to provide the service and the hope and the opportunity for every kid in America. At the end of the day, when you look at the budget, it's a budget that, again, reflects what it would look like if it's balanced. I fully understand it's a starting point. That Congress also has a say. And in the budget, Congress has the last say. But the budget does encourage some important things. It does encourage some innovation. It encourages to look at public-private partnerships, where we can, particularly in our national parks, to move people. When you have 330 million people go through our park system, some of our parks, I would think, are at capacity and maybe over. And we have to look at public-private partnerships to move people for transportation and methods. I don't particularly want to be in the industry of transportation, but I think there's some great people out there to move people in our parks more efficiently, to make sure that we maintain the park experience that is valuable to us all. So I appreciate this subcommittee and strongly to support the department's mission. I think the budget looks at core tasks and goes back to core. But I'm happy to go through and work with you, and I can say this, is that I'm red, white, and blue. I've never been red or blue. I'm red, white, and blue. I think our public lands are one of the many areas where it is not partisan. Our public lands are American, and I'm confident that this committee also shares that same feeling. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm happy to yield time to our Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Rogers, for any questions he may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for letting me sit in, and welcome to a birthday party for our chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to your old stomping grounds.
Mic on?
I think so. Can you not hear me? Congratulations on your confirmation. As you know, I come from coal country, what used to be coal country. Now these towns have more plywood windows than pane glass. I've lost 12,000 coal mining jobs just in my district in the last couple or 3 years, a good part of which was caused by the United States federal government under the last administration. The war on coal is real and unfortunately has had a devastating impact. That's why the Congress, over the last 2 years, passed a pilot program to help reclaim abandoned mines that's been sitting there for all these years. For the purpose of doing what we're supposed to do, that's reclaim these abandoned mines, but probably more importantly, hopefully, produce some jobs to keep these families from going completely underwater. So for the last 2 years, this subcommittee wisely funded a pilot program within your department focused on the reclamation of abandoned mine lands. The AML pilot program is a win-win. It's good for the environment, and it's good for jobs. It has bipartisan support here in the Congress, and we're seeing results, good results of projects that have been undertaken and delivered with this 2-year pilot program. It's working, and it's helping a desperate areas of the country. It's limited to a few states where the impact has been the most severe. That's why I was completely flabbergasted in seeing in your budget request the elimination of that program. This coming from an administration that I had been led, had asked the Office of Surface Mining to draw up a report on the projects funded under the pilot project in fiscal 16. I'm told now that OMB's ordered even that study canceled. I just want to say to you, Mr. Secretary, this is serious stuff. And I'm hopeful that you can at least shake loose that report so we can see whether or not it's working. I maintain it is, but we're entitled to have proof. And so I would hope that you could help us shake loose that report. Do you have any ideas about it?
Mr. Chairman, I have not heard about the report. I will do what I can to shake that loose on that. By and large, as you know, coal's up 16%. The president has said the war on coal is over. I'll go back to this is what a balanced budget would look like. It's a good starting point. And I, too, have spent time in the beautiful state of Kentucky. I was just in Ohio with the coal miners there. And I've seen communities hollowed out. And it is devastating.
Yeah.
It's just not the coal across the country. It's the small logging towns. It's along the coastline in Alaska, which has arguably the toughest conditions, and they have not had access to their livelihood.
Quickly, secondly, let me mention to you the Reclaim Act, which is now a bipartisan, bicameral bill. Several at this table are co-sponsors of it. Reclaim, which is to take monies from the unused, unspent, abandoned mine lands fund, which has been in existence, as you know, for years, and has accumulated billions of dollars sitting there, unused, while the reclaimed mine lands out there are unreclaimed, and employment is hard to come by. So the Reclaim Act would take $2 billion from the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund to require it be used for what it was saved up for and authorized by law, and that's to reclaim abandoned mine lands. This bill would do that, but it would also add an asterisk. The money must be used on reclaimed abandoned mine lands, but with a bent toward economic development potential for creating jobs at the same time with those funds. It's a multi-state bill. It has agreement in the West and the East of the U.S. and from both parties and both houses of the Congress. And I would hope, Ms. Secretary, that you would see your way clear to be supportive of that type of bill. Have you thought about that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's it's interesting on the Mine Reclaim Act. The water reclamation has about $20 billion. Now it's not sitting anymore, but the money was designed. The program was designed to have dams come in, revenue from dams, as an example, and then be distributed for water reclamation projects. There's $20 billion that has not been redistributed. It's in the Treasury. Same thing with LWCF at $18 billion, mine reclamation. So a lot of these programs, money, it was designed to be helpful, to be targeted to an area, but the process of how it's occurred has not allowed that actually to happen. And I do agree that in water reclamation, those are jobs. Not only the construction jobs, but also improving our water distribution in the West, our canal systems when we can coordinate and work together with the Army Corps of Engineers, mine reclamation. There's, I don't know, about 1,800 mines, I guess, that are on the list for reclamation. But to turn those lands over to something productive, I think, is beneficial to us all.
That's what the Reclaim Act does and is intended to do. I'm overstepping my time. But, Ms. Secretary, thank you for listening to me on this, and I hope we could confer further about it as we go along.
I look forward to it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. I suspect those obligations exist, but I suspect the money that's supposedly in those lockboxes doesn't. But we'll get to that later. With that, Ms. McCollum, you're recognized.
Maybe call for a structural change.
Thank you. As been pointed out, that the FY18 budget request for the interior programs is under the subcommittee's jurisdiction, is 13% below the 2017 enacted level. And Mr. Secretary, you've been quoted as saying, quote, "I looked at the budget, I'm not happy, we're going to fight about it. I think I'm going to win at the end of the day," and you talked about this just being a start. And this committee's been made very much aware of how OMB plays a significant role in deciding how much funding the department requests. But you've expressed some concerns and some cuts. So I'm going to pop my questions together. So one of the questions that I have is on the department's ability to fulfill its responsibilities. I'm very concerned about staffing cuts, as I pointed out, being able to do that, and some cuts in some other area programs. Another question that I have, and I'm going to give you something to take back with you, is I need to better understand your policies, way you're going to respond to Democratic letters of inquiry, and how the time commitments are going to be filled between Democratic and Republican letters and inquiries. And the reason why I ask this is I don't want to believe that this is true, but we have been told that the administration's policy is not to respond to requests from the minority. And so I've submitted a couple letters as ranking member, and I've had other members contact me about letters that they've submitted going all the way back to February and haven't heard anything yet. And so I just want to make you personally aware of this because from your statements and from the way that I know you want to work collegiately with this committee and on these issues, I give this to the chair to give to you, just to put this on your radar screen. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about climate change. So as I pointed out, the President's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is very disappointing to me, extraordinarily disappointing. But there's been call for clarity about what the President and the Cabinet believes about climate change and what they're willing to do to address it, because the President has said that he's willing to discuss this. You yourself have made conflicting statements about climate change over the years. In 2014, you said it's not a hoax, but it's not a proven science either. During your confirmation hearing, you acknowledged that humans are an influence on climate change, but you noted that since the U.S. Geological Survey, as part of the Department of Interior, you will be becoming a lot more familiar with it, and you're looking to work on objective-based science. So could you clarify for us what you do agree that climate change is caused by greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, methane that's being released into the atmosphere? In 2013, the oil and gas industry contributed 29% of the methane released into the atmosphere. Coal mining accounted for 10%. And so because you have in the Department of Interior regulation over mining, oil, and gas development on public lands, how are we going to use our position, or you're going to use your position, to combat the threats of climate change as leases are put forward? I believe that there needs to be a balance in development and conservation on our public lands. So I'm interested in learning what you see as an acceptable limit to energy production on federal lands to achieve balance, and what actions are being proposed in the 2018 budget to mitigate or adapt the effects of climate change on federal lands. Because this is something that I have people from all over the country inquiring about what we're going to do now that we're out of the Paris Agreement, so that we don't lose our leadership role and we do not become a rogue nation among other nations in this world with Syria and Nicaragua when it comes to addressing climate change.
So kind of go down the list real quick. I think the budget looks at core responsibilities. And again, what does a budget would look like if you did balance it in 10 years? So this is the President's And I support, this is what a budget would look like if we're going to balance in 10 years without increasing revenue. As far as responsiveness to both sides of the aisle, I've committed to come over to the Hill and talk to you personally every quarter. I said that to Chairman Bishop's committee in a bipartisan
Mr. Secretary,
way.
I know you have, but I want to know what guarantee we have that the people who work for you will respond to our letters.
I'll look at that, but I come over personally, on things, but we'll and certainly we want to be responsive because on your issues as well as both sides. I think that's just what government should do. The Paris Agreement, it's about 20 pages, and as you go to about the 5th page, I think it's just a bad negotiated deal, and this is the construct of it. We paid $3 billion, $1 billion up front. Cash, the $1 billion, $1 billion cash. It lets China, India, Russia walk. The CO2 in China actually increases till 2030 because it's structured on people. So China has more people. So the world's greatest polluter takes a walk till 2030. We have to immediately reduce ours. That puts us at a permanent disadvantage economically. Aside from the climate change argument, and then you look at the MIT report, at the end of the day, it makes insignificant difference. So the structure of the deal, I think, was less about climate change. It was just a bad deal. And there was a couple bad deals. The Iranian deal, in my judgment, was
Mr.
a
Chairman,
bad deal.
With all due respect, and Mr. Secretary, I don't mean to cut you off, but could you then address what I asked you, what you think the department should do? I understand that, but I don't have, as much as you and I could get into debate about the Iranian nuclear deal, this is in the preview of this committee.
But it's, my point was, I think it's a bad deal. So climate change, people, I've been pretty consistent in my views on climate change. I don't believe it's a hoax. I think man has had an influence. I think climate is changing. In reference to Glacier Park, glaciers started melting in Glacier Park right after the end of the Ice Age. It's been a consistent melt, including Lake Missoula, which is having an ice dam, and I grew up in Glacier Park. But I've seen the glaciers melt when eating lunch on a glacier. And the problem is we don't understand what the effects are. There's no model that exists. And USGS has some terrific scientists. There's no model that can predict yesterday from all the data we collect. But certainly the climate's changing in ways we don't understand. Man has had an influence, but man has had a negative influence not only on CO2, but you look at arsenic, you look at the chemicals that we have looked at agriculture across. So man has not been a particularly good influencer anyway on a lot of things. And CO2 is a concern. But what should we do about it? What can we do about it? What is the right path forward? I think we need a discussion away from politics and go to science. And I have full confidence in USGS. We've looked at some great leadership coming in. Let's just focus on science. Let's focus on absolute core science. The budget, we had duplicative, redundant programs where even among our departments, we were not together. So on the climate issue in USGS, we saddled it in one division because I want to know from a division what's going on. So that was the decision. Some was budget, and some it was between the Fish and Wildlife and BLM and Park Service and our different agencies. We need to be on the same page so we can address what the conclusion is. And I invite you to work with us on that, and we'll be transparent. I'll get your study, out of there. But I'll get, I'm confident that we have enough expertise, but also redirecting into research to make sure we're addressing the core science of it is a concern.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to seeing a detailed budget with the cuts that were into USGS on how you consolidated and kept all the research moving forward at a consistent level. Thank you.
Thanks, Gentlelady. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for being here, Secretary. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you last Friday when you were out in Idaho. I understand you and Secretary Perdue had a chance to, you were visiting NIFC, but you had a chance to go see the famous blue turf.
It's there.
It's and it is blue, isn't it?
It is, Mr. Chairman, it is blue.
I also want to thank the chairman for mentioning that we're going to be reintroducing our wildfire fighting bill today with a whole bunch of sponsors and co-sponsors and original sponsors and so forth. Introducing another bill that you might be interested in that I'd like the department to take a look at. We're going to be introducing it also today. It's the lands bill, which is going to reauthorize the Land and Water Conservation Fund for 7 years under mandatory funding, taking half of it to go to the Land and Water Conservation Fund to be split in a way between the state and federal side, and the other half to be used in backlog maintenance in our parks and our other land management agencies for $450 million a year, which hopefully we would get at addressing that backlog maintenance in these various agencies. As I said, it would be mandatory funding. We still have to find the offset for it, but we're hoping that we can maybe work that into the infrastructure package because it is infrastructure that we have the backlog on, as you said, with the roads and stuff. So I'd like your department to take a look at that and give us your thoughts on it. Just to mention, and I want to follow up just a little bit on with what Ms. McCollum said, I don't think any of us deny that climate change is occurring. But I also realize that there's nobody in this government that can tell me how much money government-wide we spend on climate change. Because it's diverse. It goes everywhere, every department. That's the key phrase now. If you want to increase your budget, put money in for climate change. So every agency has money in for climate change in their budget request. I thought at one time I'd take all the climate change money out of all the budgets and put it in one place so that we could find out how much we're spending and that we're not being duplicative. In fact, I thought of the USGS because they are a great organization, and maybe that's where it ought to be. But right now, climate change is the key phrase everybody uses when they want to get, every agency uses when they want to get money in their budget. After 9/11, it was national security. If you want to grow corn in Iowa, we did it for national security reasons. That was the key phrase you had to put in every budget. So those terms change, and climate change has become the one now. And but we need to do a better job of coordinating how we spend. Now my question, after all that, you did a secretarial order today, or you're going to on sage-grouse. Explain to me the secretarial order, if you would, and what are the next steps that we take to address this issue?
I did sign a secretarial order. Had a conference with the governors, Western governors last night, and this is what it did. On our side, it formed a task group. So Fish and Wildlife, BLM, and with a coordinating reach to to Forest Service, that we can actually begin a consultation process where we're on the same page. Some of the complaints was that BLM had a different view as Fish and Wildlife, so you'd go down a path for a while and BLM would give you some guidance, and then Fish and Wildlife would come in at the last moment and change that guidance, or vice versa. So from our side of the house, the secretarial order did three things. One is it prioritized the effort, that it has Secretary Zinke priority. Two is it formed a task group so we could coordinate the plans better, and it opened up a state's ability to formulate a plan shaped to the state rather than just to us. So we incorporated things like if a state feels comfortable about going on numbers, vice habitat, captive breeding, predator control. We allowed the states more flexibility on how they approached it. What the secretarial order did not do is it did not stop or mandate a revision of the work that's already been done, because there has been a lot of really good work on sage grouse, and so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We just wanted to give the states, if they can think of, or they want a more innovative approach according to their data, then it allows that. So that's what occurred.
What was the governor's reaction, just out of curiosity? Characterize it.
Positive. One is that the consultation, many of the governors had not read it yet, but that's why we had the conference call, is to assure them that most of it was on our side, to form the task group from us, to make sure that we're on the same page, and then give them more latitude. The governors are not all the same on the approach.
Right.
Utah is quite a bit different than even Wyoming. And I think that's a good thing, to have some flexibility on approach. The evaluation is really not on habitat per se, it's on whether the numbers of the sage grouse are healthy.
Right.
So it did give another tool to evaluate whether their plan periodically, as we look at what the numbers should be, or whether their plan is effective or not.
Well, thank you for working on that. I'm sure it's something we will be revisiting with you many times over the coming years as we try to work this out. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, gentlemen. Ms. Loy.
Thank you very much. And before I go to another subject, I just want to say, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your response to Ms. McCullum, that you've agreed to really evaluate all these programs and not just discount them, not just accept the cuts, but make your own determination in areas where you think we should be taking positive action. I think that's really important. You're entitled to your own review, but what we're really asking is that it's as objective review as possible, and then report back to us your decision. But on another area, the national heritage areas, the Heritage Partnership Program supports grants to local nonprofit groups in support of historical and cultural recognition, preservation, and tourism activities. This funding is so vital for the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area, which happens to include my district, and is truly an investment in the economy. The Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area has an estimated economic impact of $584 million, sustains 6,530 jobs, brings in $67 million in tax revenue to local communities, giving taxpayers a good return on their investment. And yet, your budget proposes to wind down heritage partnership programs. Eliminating this initiative would mean there is no direct financial support to the national heritage areas, which are managed by nonprofit organizations, and just would not be able to make up these cuts. Without this federal assistance, I'd like to know how many congressionally designated national heritage areas will be self-sustaining.
I'll find that number out. But you're right, and I recognize the Heritage Program has been terrific over time. It has done enormous amount of good in communities that may not have all the resources to protect part of our nation's history. The budget zeroes it.
That's right.
And the reason is that the priority is our holdings first. Meaning that when we have Arlington, when we have the battlefields, when we have our parks, we have our facilities, our fisheries, we have 2,400 facilities and sites across the country, is the view was in a balanced budget. What would it look like is that our stuff comes first. We give $5.5 billion worth of grants out. I would love to give ourselves a grant on fixing what we have, and the worst actually is Washington, D.C. If you look at Jefferson is going to take about the monument about $26 million because Jefferson sits on mud, and it's leaning now, and so we have to pump up the foundation for it. We still can't figure out how to fix the George Washington elevator. A lot of the which drives me nuts, believe me. And then I look around our parks, the fountains. So we need to fix our stuff. So the priority in this budget was fixing our stuff first, and the $35 million plus up in our infrastructure, came at the expense of some of it was the Heritage Fund and other things.
Let me just say, I appreciate that you're just assuming these responsibilities and that you and your staff, if you can afford your staff, I'm not sure where that is right now.
And we're making a lot of savings by not having anybody.
Well, that's probably.
We save money every day.
Well, that's probably because a judgment's probably been made that you're so talented and that you have that capacity. But in all seriousness, I know so many of these things are partnerships without mentioning names. There are philanthropists that had a major role at the Washington Monument. The same person is doing the Arlington Cemetery. The same person did the welcoming exhibit
And
for the White House.
terrific commitment to our country.
Yeah, he's
and
quite extraordinary.
And a absolute first-class patriot.
He really is.
I wish we had 1,000 people like that.
Well, maybe that's a good thing for you to do. Reach out and explain the importance of all these projects. I am just saying that another commitment of the president and this administration is creating jobs. And these historic areas with their grants do create very important partnerships. So I'm not underestimating the importance of Arlington Cemetery and all the monuments, and we know they all have to be done. But as you're reviewing the entire budget and putting your own footprint, hopefully you'll have staff to assist you in this effort, you remember the national heritage areas. Not that they are going to take money from Arlington Cemetery. I am sure they won't, but it's an important project, and I would appreciate your consideration.
And I certainly recognize the value of the heritage that is done to our country.
And if you need any more numbers or facts, I'm very happy to share.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I thank the ranking member. Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, Mr. Secretary, it's a pleasure to have you here. I want to, everybody around this table certainly knows, but we appreciate your service to our country in uniform. We appreciate your service when you were here as one of our colleagues, and we appreciate your service now as Secretary. I don't think the President could have made a better appointment. And we may agree or disagree on something, but look, you are the perfect person for this job, given your background, your values, and the commitment in Indian country. It's just so thank you for doing it. I'm going to run through some things really quickly, and then I want to get to some questions, particularly on tribal energy development. And some places I'm going to agree with you, and some I'm going to disagree. I'm going to start with agreeing with you and the President of the United States on the Paris Climate Accord. Thank you, and thank the President for pulling us out of, I think, what you described perfectly as a very bad deal. In my part of the world, believe me, that was an extremely popular decision by the President of the United States, and we think was the right one. And I applaud him for being willing to negotiate and saying, we're happy to sit down and talk with you. We're just not going to stay here with a bad deal for the United States of America. I think it's exactly what he did. I also want to thank you for sticking up for the oil and gas industry. You know, that's pretty important in my part of the world, and everybody here sure likes $2 a gallon gas rather than $4. And you'll know this as a military guy. The biggest strategic advantage we've probably developed in the last 30 years is we're finally energy independent again. And that's a big deal. There's a wonderful article today about us exporting 1 million barrels a day right now to other parts of the world. So that's a pretty big change. And finally, the biggest raise any American's gotten in the last decade is $2 a gallon gasoline and a cheaper cost of heating and cooling their home. And that's largely driven by private energy and initiatives and enterprise. I'm going to agree or disagree with you a little bit. I'm going to agree with my good friend, the ranking member, Ms. McCollum,
These cuts in some of these Indian programs are just not acceptable. I mean, this is the poorest part of our population. This committee has struggled, as she rightly pointed out, on a bipartisan basis to try and make some progress in these areas, and you don't balance the budget on the back of your poorest citizens. And I think some of these decisions are driven more by numbers than by equity and looking after people. And frankly, in this case, these are treaty obligations, and tribes have taken us to court before and beaten us for not living up to our treaty obligations. And I know you take those seriously. Finally, I'm going to disagree with you also that this is a budget that balances. I was sent to the Budget Committee. I don't know how I offended Chairman Rogers, but he sent me there. And so I'm now in my 7th year. He liberated Calvert. You kept me there. I mean, that's just, I don't know what I did, but I did learn a few things there. And I don't say this critically of the president. He made some commitments, but we'll see serious balanced budget when we see serious entitlement reform. I mean, that's just the fact of it. We're trying to leave 75% of the budget untouched and balanced within the rest and meet the priorities that we need to do in terms of defense. And I think your budget's a victim of that. I think other budgets are a victim of that. I hope next year we actually do have serious discussions, or the year after at some point, about how you really balance the budget, but you don't leave Social Security and Medicare out of the equation and think you're going to balance it. So now, where an area we do agree, because I know how much you value sovereignty and, frankly, your commitment on Native American issues, because I got to work with you here. One of the most important, we always talk about gaming revenue, but one of the most important sources of revenue for tribes, of course, is energy development, particularly oil and gas, coal, Interior plays a very important role in that. The whole issue of permitting, I mean, this is, at the end of the day, we sometimes treat Indian land like it's public land. It's not. It's owned by the Indian tribes. We hold it in trust for them. But we have an obligation, obviously, to do the best we can to enable them to develop their resources. Frankly, that works to our advantage, because they reinvest in their people, and it actually lowers some of the demands that we have in these critical areas like law enforcement and health care. So could you give me an overview of what you're doing to try to help those tribes that are blessed with natural resources to develop those resources as rapidly as possible?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Overall, is that Indian country, at least on contract support costs, that was fully funded, and the tribal grants were also, I think it was a $1 million plus. So that part of the budget, the self-determination, and at least the administer programs, those were there. The water settlements also, as you know, we've had a couple water settlements, so that is moving forward. So we're meeting our obligations. We're looking at some of on the water settlement issues. What I didn't realize, and maybe I should have, is that they go into account, but they can't withdraw the account until the account's full. And putting the account full takes years.
The gentleman yield on that point
Certainly
for a
yield.
second. Why can't Interior use the judgment account out of the Justice Department in order to settle some of these water rights issues?
We're actually, Mr. Chairman, we're actually looking at that. We're also looking at a tribe to, because if you're looking at a $40 million project and you got to wait 10 years, it's not going to be $40 million. It's going to be $60 million. So and this is where the tribe's sovereignty would make sense. If a tribe wants to, as money goes in the account, if they want to use it, maybe we should allow them a path to use it. So we're looking at that. So if they have money in the account and they have a water project that what the water compact specifies, if they get started on it, let's distribute the funds rather than locking it up for a generation by the time that the account's full. So we're looking at that as well. On the energy side, it includes about $27.4 million in BIA for energy. But I can tell you from looking at the structure of what it's like to live on an Indian reservation and try to get through the hurdles as opposed to non-reservation land. And energy, in my view, is the right of the tribe to decide. It's not the U.S. government's right to decide whether they should or can't. We just want to make sure that sovereignty should mean something. So we have to look at our permitting process and how it is much more encumbered on Indian territory than it is off. So at least it should be on par, but it's not. And so we're looking at also on making sure that we're actually a partner rather than an adversary on such things, and pushing more authority if a tribe wants to develop their energy. Again, it's their decision. Then we should honor that and actually be helpful rather than being, in some cases, the system is so complicated that, and the hurdles. What we're also looking at, which I think will be helpful, is how can we as a department be more joint? How can we, on permitting process, rather than having the hurdles go through Fish and Wildlife and then go to BLM and then cross-deck over to Army Corps of Engineers and then go to NOAA, because if you have a trout and a salmon in the same stream, who has jurisdiction? Well, trout are Fish and Wildlife, salmon are NOAA, you might have irrigation, which is Bureau of Reclamation, and you might have Army Corps. And of the three, you might have two which are in conflict with each other that's not reconcilable. So we have to look at how us, as a government, can act more joint. And so we're looking at a model a lot like a combatant command and a lot like how we fight forest fires, is at least from the government side, we should be able to offer a industry or a tribe a permitting process that early in the development they should know whether or not it's possible or not.
Well, let me give you a quick suggestion on the energy part, which is, as you think through this, if where Indian reservations are at, there's non-Indian reservation land, and most of them have state regulatory systems that decide who can drill. I've talked to some of the people that developed the Bakken Shale from Oklahoma, and I said, why, and this was before they'd gone on the 3 affiliated tribes' land, which we now have substantial energy development, and it's benefiting those tribes. But I asked, why aren't you guys dealing in Indian reservation land? And one of them told me, he says, real simple. He said, on one side of an imaginary line, I've got a state regulatory system that I can get a permit in 3 weeks, costs about $250. On the other side of this imaginary line, a reservation where the feds are doing that, it costs about $6,000 and it takes almost a year. So guess where we drill? And, it's not like North Dakota, it doesn't know how to regulate drilling. It does, or Oklahoma or these other states. So we ought to try to mirror image the state regulatory system. I even suggested, although the tribes weren't too keen on this, I said, why don't you compact with the state and have them come on your land and they can do the regulatory process? But there's deep concern about violation of sovereignty, and there's a lot of tension between state and local governments. But if we're going to do it through the feds, we ought to just basically look at what's the state system here. That seems to be acceptable to most people, and we should operate accordingly and try to match their timelines and their cost and whatever, not impose something that might or might not be appropriate on public lands, but it certainly shouldn't be imposed on Indian lands once they've made, as you rightly point out, the decision that they want to develop. And I agree with you 100%. Totally their decision whether they want to do it. But if they do, then we ought to give them the same kind of speed that that private people get, in state-regulated areas that are immediately adjacent to their reservation. With that, anyway, you've been very generous, Chairman. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you. Thank the gentleman. Ms. Pingree.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to yield to Ms. Capter, who has another meeting she needs to.
No, without objection.
I want to thank Congresswoman Pingree very much for that. Mr. Secretary, welcome back. I'm going to be passing out a little map here of the Great Lakes to any committee member who's interested. And my questions will actually involve USGS, and the substantial cuts your administration proposes. But in listening to the conversation this morning, thank you for your testimony and for your commitment to our country. You referenced an $11 billion backlog of
11.5, it's just in parks.
Just in parks, okay.
That represents about 73% of our total maintenance backlog.
Okay, let me share an experience. In 1987, I began the long quest to build a World War II memorial here in Washington. It took us 17 years. Not a penny of federal dollars went into it. We began with at that time there was a deficit also. You know, every decade there's a deficit. So we said, well, okay, how are we going to do this? And we began with the issuance of minting coins that raised the first $7 million. We did not do postage stamps, although I'm thinking of something in that regard, adding a penny or two to a postage stamp for a certain purpose. The Postal Service has the ability to do that. A private committee was set up. Senator Dole helped lead that committee. FedEx contributed, and thousands of other companies did, and individuals. And the total cost of the memorial was probably about $500 million, all told. What happened at the beginning was that the fountain was restored. I actually fought against the Department of Interior getting the World War II memorial because I wanted it to be with the American Battle Monuments Commission. They had to transfer ownership. But to date, the department's done a very commendable job. But what happened at the beginning was the first major expense we had was that Americans were coming to the site, and just like 3 coins in a fountain, they were throwing money in the fountain. So rather than the Department of Interior figuring out, hey, wait a minute, the American people want to help here, they put up signs, do not throw money in coins. And then the signs got bigger. And I thought, wait a minute, this is nuts. The people want to help. Why don't you find a way for them to help? Well, I guess now there may be an app or something that somebody can find somewhere that they can contribute. But I really think with your background and your leadership, you could put together the most gangbuster concept to engage the American people, to help our national parks, and to help to raise the money that's necessary to fix this stuff. I'm all for federal appropriation, or I wouldn't be here in Congress, so I agree with that. But I know what we were able to mobilize. It's been 30 years now since we began that effort. It took us 17 years to finally dedicate in 2004. But I learned a lot from that experience, and I learned about the generosity of the American people. I learned about how difficult it was to work with the government of the United States to try to get donations, and all we had to do. So there's something wrong at the Department of Interior. Now, I don't want a McDonald's sign over Mount Rushmore. This is not what I'm getting at, all right? But I know what we did with the World War II Memorial, and we continue to this day. There are NGOs, like there's a 501c called Friends of the World War II Memorial that sits out there with a chair, with a committee. Many sites have these kinds of organizations. I really would urge you to consider using that example and kind of looking at other assets that we must manage. Imagine what Arlington would, what the American people would do if they really understood what was needed at Arlington. Every state would adopt a section. The creativity that's needed here is someone who thinks about fundraising and has a great national commitment. And the baby boom generation is about to retire with the largest transfer of wealth in American history. So I just think there's a lot there. So I just want to put that on the record this morning.
If the gentlelady would yield on one point, I know we talked about this. If you go to Canada, you pay more to go to a national park than Canadians. And I know a substantial number of people that come to our national parks are not U.S. citizens. I just put that out there.
Well, I'll say this is that I've commissioned a quick study. And everyone loves our parks. Absolutely. It's amazing that about half of the parks we don't charge at all. We don't charge at all. And we divided our parks into tiers. And a lot of our parks don't even follow that, the tier system. So we are looking at, we want to make sure our parks are value, especially for families and want to go to our parks, so that we're not Disneyland, to your point, about our fee.
Right.
But there are, I think we do got to be innovative, forming a committee on public-private partnerships.
Yes.
Because there's things like Wi-Fi
Right.
that we should be able to, the airlines do it, so we should be able to have Wi-Fi. we should on our fees coming in, there has to be an incentive for a superintendent to at least follow the rules. And the incentive is that a lot of that should come back to that specific park and give some latitude how to spend it. So there has to be an incentive in structurally how to do it. And there's a lot of really good people that love our parks.
Oh, absolutely. My cousin's just walking the Appalachian Trail. We can't find him. He's out there somewhere.
And the trail needs a little work too, by the way.
Yeah, he got stuck in that. But the point is, I think enlivening the spirit of the American people, if you give them a target, they'll reach it. They just don't know. I think you're divided up into so many subcomponents, people lose sight of you. I'm just using stamps. I've been doing my bills. I don't do bills by the internet. I do it by hand.
And Mr. Chairman, if you did,
I saw all
also,
these pictures of wild animals. I'm thinking, is the Park Service getting an extra penny for this?
well, and we talk a lot about our Park Service, but Interior reminds me every day that there's wildlife refuges, there's other assets that are not park, and I remind them, if I talk about BLM a lot on the East Coast, people don't know what I'm talking about, because the face, to a degree, of Interior is the parks.
Right.
And, when you go to a park, you should be in the right uniform, and the bathrooms should be clean. We'll just start there. So we're re-emphasizing, I would say, infrastructure and clean bathrooms to begin with.
Okay, now I'll get to my question very, very quickly. I've been discouraged, but I understand the pressures you're under with OMB. But being a Great Lakes representative, I have to say that the state I represent means many rivers. Ohio, that's what the word means. And you were at the Ohio River, I believe, just recently. I don't know if you saw the Asian carp jumping out, but they're there. They've eaten up all the local species. And the reason, my question really, in the map I've handed out, points at what is happening to the Great Lakes, particularly relative to algal blooms. Your budget proposes an 18% cut in the National Water Quality Program, and I would really direct your attention to that because language in your submission states that with that cut, you would have to lay off 108 full-time equivalent employees. You would suspend studies about how nutrients, carbon, and sediment are transported and delivered to small streams in the agricultural Midwest. You'll note those lakes, particularly at Toledo, that I represent, where there was a major water crisis 3 years ago where microcystin got into the fresh water. We have to have data to understand the emerging contaminants and their threat to fresh drinking water supplies. Lake Erie is the most drawn upon of the lakes, serves the most people in the United States and Canada. This really is a very dangerous proposal with USGS because when the crisis happened, just so you know, and I was flailing around on the weekend trying to find the right person at the federal government to help us understand what level of microcystin can people drink, guess what? We don't really have a standard. So the United States defaults to the world standard at 1 part per billion. And we needed proper testing. We needed a regimen. You don't want to know how bad that system is in our country. So USGS is important. I would urge you to revisit that part of your budget, and believe me, I'm going to try to help you. But we don't need to threaten fresh water supplies across our country. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and happy birthday as well. And Mr. Secretary, I'd echo and second the comments already made by Mr. Cole, and glad to have you here today. I'd like to talk to you about sage grouse.
Thank you, Shelley.
No, I don't want to steal Mr. Amadeus thunder. You get tag teamed here by the Lake Erie people, and so I'm going to follow.
We put $13.5 million in for the carp. I've never seen one, but I know they're there.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't get a picture because Congresswoman Capter sent one around. Was the ugliest looking fish that I think she could ever find. That they sent it around and captured everyone's attention when we were at a full committee meeting one day. We were getting the talking about carp, but
And I don't mean to joke on it because I understand how serious it is.
Yes, it is.
It is a serious issue.
it's game set match if they get in the lakes.
Yeah.
But on that note, because I know you want to talk about this some more, obviously it's very important and critical for drinking water, but it also provides commercial and sport fishing, to name a few of the benefits. And visitors to Lake Erie region spent more than $14.1 billion in 2015. Approximately 124,000 Northern Ohio jobs, including jobs in mine and Congresswoman Capter's district, are directly linked to Lake Erie. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, or GLRI, aims to restore the Great Lakes ecosystem under one single initiative. It is guided by an action plan with detailed performance goals. An interagency task force led by the U.S. EPA is coordinating federal efforts and directing funding to other federal agencies, states, cities, and non-governmental entities. As you know, the President's fiscal year 2018 budget request eliminates the GLRI, all funding. As of February 2017, the Department of Interior agencies have received significant funding under the program. For example, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has received more than $356 million to implement 814 GLRI projects, and the U.S. Geological Survey has received more than $100 million to implement 152 GLRI projects in the region. Can you describe for this committee the consequences your agency face if you were to eliminate or significantly reduce the funding for the GLRI program? And secondly, can you give us examples of Department of Interior projects that would end or be significantly curtailed if these cuts were to take place?
Well, let me pivot and tell you what we're doing. The USGS, I'm not sure how many studies were underway, but there's multiple studies on it. But there's some conclusions that have been made. About 43 deaths and animal illness have been related to the blooms. We know that. We know that the blooms primarily are coming from nutrients in agricultural areas. That's what's causing the blooms. So it is the chemicals and nutrients from ag. So we have to address that, and that is both EPA and ourselves, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. We know just in Lake Erie, forced about 400,000 residents to go to without water for days. So we understand the consequences and the importance of it. The budget, as far as the Great Lakes goes, did include about $65.9 million in that. And it included about $13.5 million, which is about the same funding level in 17 for the carp. But the restoration part, I'll have to get with you on line by line on that part of it. Again, is that I understand the importance of it. Is it I would think this budget is a baseline, and I'll work with you on it, and Congress gets the last chop. So.
And I appreciate that. In Word, we managed to insert funding for the GLRI of $300 million a year for 5 years. And as you well know, a lot of these studies and the things that we were doing are very important because they have to have some continuity to them. You can't stop and start some of these studies in order to make them effective and worthwhile. But I also take pride in the fact that the vote was 408 to 17, and not that I have those 17 laminated, but but taking the time to explain to people who are normally, as you well know on everything, that this is the way, if we're going to operate as a government, we should operate, because all these task forces, all these agencies shared information and worked in concert to produce the desired effect of trying to clean up this problem. And I agree with you, it is an ag problem, and of course we've reached out in the states and tried to explain and to farmers that it is in fact a problem and that they can yield more with less fertilizer, and that takes time in the education process. So I appreciate working with you and offer any time to come down to your office and go through on a line-by-line basis. And you're more than welcome to ever come to the Great Lakes, you and Chairman Calvert, and I promise we'll highlight it with some fishing, and you can see firsthand that all the work that Governor, now Senator Voinovich, has done to restore the sport fishing to the Lake Erie and the Great Lakes.
Hopefully it's walleye and not carp.
Well, I hope so.
We have a large Great Lakes contingent on this committee.
Well, and if I can talk to the Great Lakes, just for a second, is that we're looking at reorganizing how we do business with the Interior. because the carp issue is an example, but it's important to the Great Lakes, but if you go across to Florida, they don't know what it is. And so even our regions, within our different regions in Interior, how you rack and stack the importance of things, a lot of really important issues locally and within the state gets lost. So we're looking at actually, rather than the USGS reporting to their region, the parks report to their region, we have these huge regions. We're looking at actually breaking it up a little and going to a joint model in smaller areas based on drainages. Powell suggested it back in the turn of the century, that he and Pinchot were late, and Roosevelt had left, they became out of favor. But we're looking at more of a model on smaller ecosystems based on reorganization. And then rather than everyone report to their own region, they would report to a joint management area like combatant commands. So these smaller areas can focus on the problems that are within their smaller regions. So we think that the one-size-fits-all model in D.C., and as we, over time, we develop these huge regions that sometimes gloss over issues that are incredibly important that need to be prioritized. So, and I'll go through with it with you in some detail the next time that because I'm quarterly where we sit on it. I've talked to Department of Ag. They're going to help us with a joint because I think it's if we can among our bureaus be a little more joint in how to do it. I think we're all better served.
I commend you on that because it's a thoughtful strategy to getting this developing. And I was down in the Everglades because they have the same algal bloom issue that we're having in Ohio. And while they don't have Asian carp, they have the pythons, which are their problem. And you drive down 41 as you go across the Everglades, there's no roadkill. The pythons are managed to eat and everything. And so the problems are alike, but different maybe slightly. But that's a great strategy to try to combat the water crisis throughout the country.
Thank you,
The
John.
gentleman from the Great Lake of Erie yield for just a microsecond to the gentlewoman from Lake Superior State.
If I have any more time left from this chairman,
Ms.
fine.
Mr.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Mr. Secretary, when the Great Lakes Restoration Fund was set up, Asian carp and the funding for Asian carp was not part of it. When Asian carp needed to be funded, they came and looked at the Great Lakes restoration because we are concerned about invasive species. So invasive species, as the gentleman from Ohio put on, is one issue we have to look at. But the Great Lakes restoration has already been nicked once with some of the work that it can do, willing to help out with Asian carp. And I just wanted to make sure that the record was clear that the Great Lakes restoration originally did not have any funding dedicated towards Asian carp. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pingree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back again, Mr. Secretary. It's nice to have a chance to chat with you again. I forgot when you came before that I meant to tell you I spent a wonderful time on a pack trip in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. It was one of the great experiences of mine and my children's life, so several years ago. And I do think we have some things in common between our M states, Montana and Maine. Just because you have mountains and we have ocean, we have some similarities. Also, Mr. Chair, happy birthday. I don't know if you know, but this is also the 110th birthday of the Antiquities Act. So I'm sure it's a joint party.
Because they're about the same age.
You would
Sometimes I feel that way, yeah.
You'd be a great-grandchild or something of the Antiquities Act. Anyway, so Mr. Secretary, when you came before, we had a chance to talk a little bit about Katahdin Woods and Waters. I didn't know. I was kind of disappointed to find out that it was the next day that got added to the list. So maybe you didn't know that day, but obviously it was under consideration. And since I didn't know it was going to be added, now you'll have the benefit of hearing everything I have to say about it and why I'm concerned about it being on the list. It's not 100,000 acres, which was your original criteria. I understand that one of the reasons it's being looked at again is to see if there was sufficient public process. And I just want you to know from my perspective and so many others, there was a lot of public process. It goes way back on this area, and also just the Northwoods of Maine have been talked about for a very long time. I brought this little folder of the 200 letters I received in my office, and this nice sticker. But I realized that I have to get a privacy waiver on everyone to give them to you, so I can't do that, although if you'd like to see them, I will call each person personally and make sure I get a privacy waiver so you can see them. And I hope you do get a sense of how much public comment and how much dialogue there has been. I've heard, or I understand, you might be coming to Maine in the next week or two to visit?
I am coming to that exact site next week.
Wonderful. Well, if you need any assistance, I'm happy to welcome you, even though it's in the 2nd Congressional District, but we all kind of care about the state as an entirety. And I'm thrilled that you're going to be there because I think you will have an opportunity to see what a wonderful area it is. And you can hear firsthand from the communities, many of whom have gone through a transition over the years. At first, deeply concerned, partly because of the loss of the paper industry and the wood products industry and some real economic changes up there, and worried about what the impact of this area might be to them. But after years of public dialogue and debate, I think the area was designed in a very good way. And now a lot of those people, many of whom I served with in the state legislature, I know them very well, have come around to the other side and said, you know what, now we're in this and we want to take advantage of the economic opportunity. Just as a reminder, the Park Service Director, John Jarvis, came up and held a meeting which had about 1,400 people. My understanding is 1,200 of them were monument supporters. By the way, in this pile I have of 200 letters, those are 200 letters in favor. I got a handful of people who raised concerns, but not very many. So many business owners have talked to us, been to visit us here, talked about the opportunities and the support, whether it's for inns and restaurants, tourism businesses, or new businesses that they hope to create. There have been 5 years in this public dialogue and discussion. Elected officials, as I said, have come around. Chambers of Commerce have been writing to us. City councils, Rotary clubs. So many traditional and non-traditional groups have come around to say, you know, it's here, it's been donated to us, the money is behind it, and we want this to continue, particularly since the decision has been made. I don't know if you'll meet with our governor. He has been in opposition to this, but I think he's increasingly becoming a lone voice. And I hope that you'll take that into consideration in your conversation with him. CNN named the area one of the best places to visit in 2017, showing that there's been a lot of attention to this. I myself have been up there and think it's a great place to be. So I hope you see all that, and I hope you see and have a chance to talk to some of those groups and individuals who have really started to see this as a great economic opportunity for that area, and visitors are starting to come in big numbers, especially as we begin our very short summer season. So one of the things I'm puzzled about that I'd like to get you to comment, I know the governor has suggested and others, well, why doesn't this just become a state park? It's right up against the Katahdin area, which is a state park, maybe 3 times the size, with many, many more restrictions than the Katahdin Wood and Waters has. Some have suggested it goes to the Forest Service. And kind of in keeping with what you were talking about before, and I appreciate all you had to say about the fact that everybody loves national parks. We have Acadia National Park. It's one of the most visited parks in the country. Parks create jobs, as Mr. Kilmer has noted for us, and you've agreed. People see the face of our parks, and they don't say, oh, I think I'll go visit a national forest. They say, I want to see a national park, or I want to see a national monument. It has a lot of significance, and it brings behind huge economic opportunities. So can you tell me if you had conversations or thinking about this idea of, let's call it a national forest or something else? Or you can give me your overall thoughts about this and what your current concerns are.
I was tasked by the president, as you know, on the executive order to review parks that are 100,000 and above, and from 1996 forward, and the Maine was included in that. I've learned more about the Antiquities Act in the last few months than I think most people, probably even the people that designed it. It's singular. So the Antiquities Act does not require NEPA, does not require public consultation. It is the power of the president to do it. Under the law, it does state a minimum area in order that's compatible to protection of the object. And the object, the definition of the object, because the Antiquities Act itself is not very long. My sense is this, is that I don't intend to rip off Band-Aids where there's no Band-Aids. Many of our monuments are to a degree settled. There's some controversial ones more than others, but is it in the best public interest? And I have to be consistent in review of it, and I'll make my recommendations. I don't really have any preconceived notions. I've talked to Senators King, Senators Collins. I have not talked to the governor in person. We have a open process where it's regulations.gov, because when I evaluated the Bears Ears, I think I've talked to Nature Conservancy and spent an enormous amount of time, and then reviewing the thousands of comments on it. I can't wait to see it. My understanding is I'm going to go canoeing, which is something that Maine is known for. If you want to talk about your experience about it, I'd love to hear that. But I don't have any preconceived recommendations, because I just want to see it. I'm talking to the family that gave the property with, I believe, is somewhere around a $40 million endowment. What was their intent on the property? I've heard, although it's not been verified, that at one time a national park was looked at, which would take an act of Congress to do. It's interesting, just as a point, in some of the monuments that were recently created, they were created over things. Like over a wilderness or a proposed wilderness. So how does that work? Because you have a proposed area that's a wilderness that operates as a wilderness until Congress takes action, which in many times is more restrictive than what the monument proclamation is. So what takes precedence? So I think no doubt my recommendations are going to be that Congress, I'm going to ask Congress to clean up some of the ambiguity between, as you place a monument over on top of something else, is that how do I manage that property? And what should it be at the end of the day? Is the monument the right vehicle? Is the national park the right deal? In some places, it's a national recreation area. And the park and the national recreation area is authority and power of Congress, and not the president. My basic look at such things in Maine is it to degree settled? Are people comfortable with it? Is the majority of elected officials that are responsible for their voice, are they comfortable with it? And is it the best interest of the public? And then looking at what's the right vehicle for this and make a recommendation. But there is no question that I'm going to have a recommendation is for Congress on to help clean up some of the management side of it. I can tell you when I visited Bears Ears, there's some unbelievably important sites culturally for the American Indians. There are some dwellings. But you pull up along a road, there's no sign, there's no lavatories, there's no parking lot, there's no infrastructure. There's no structure in place to protect exactly what the intent was to do. So, visitor experience, but also make sure that you have to monitor and put in place some basic protections to as simple as a bathroom along a trail, because if there's not a bathroom, we all know what happens. So, I think in some cases we got to walk through from bow to stern in a canoe analogy, to make sure that when it's a monument, there's a responsibility to manage it for the proclamation, but that management piece, we got to make sure it makes sense and we're not in conflict with other land classes within it.
Thank you, gentlelady.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And once again, Secretary, thank you. I've had a number of times to congratulate you, and I just have to add my voice to Mr. Cole and others what a wonderful choice I think you are for this position. I understand the responsibilities you have, and our desire is to help you in those responsibilities. I have to say before I get to my issues, and that is thank the President for his decision on Paris Agreement. I know there's some disagreement here among the committee, but if you care about climate change and if you think climate change is important to the future of our country, then you can't support the Paris Agreement because it did almost nothing to address the problem and came at the cost of trillions of dollars. And I do think we can do better than that if you feel like that's an issue that's important to our future. Thank you for coming out to Utah. It was great to spend a few days with you as we looked at Grand Escalante and Bears Ears and spent some time flying in helicopters that you and I have both done. And if I could just make one comment and then get to my issues, and that is, as you know, having spent some time in my state, and it won't surprise you anyway, these communities are tiny islands in a sea of federal lands. I've got 3 counties. They only have 7% of their county is privately owned. And the rest is federal or state lands, and mostly federal lands. And it's ironic that most of these people, I mean, the last thing they want to do is get up in the morning and think about Washington, D.C., to think about policies that are taking place here in Congress. They don't want to be part of Washington. That's why they live where they do, many of them. They want to just have Washington leave them alone. And yet the irony is that Washington has enormous impact on their lives, far more than most Americans, because of the fact they're surrounded by federal lands and the problems that brings. So if I could address 2 things, Mr. Zinke, and ask for your help on these. And the first one isn't as dramatic. I'm going to save the more dramatic one for the second. But that is the previous administration had an executive order that required minimum wage and overtime rules for federal employees. Well, I think unintentionally that spilled over to hunters and guides. I love to run river. I've run river by myself sometimes, but in other cases, it's unfamiliar. I've had to hire a guide to do it. There are scenic guides, there's hunting guides, there's a lot of that where people from the East Coast, for example, who don't know the West, they won't come out and enjoy this land without someone guiding them and showing them how to do it. And yet this minimum wage and overtime rule is literally driving small mom and pop businesses out of business because they can't do it. Look, if you're a college kid and you love to run river and you say, hey, I'll pay you a couple $1,000s a month to come run river, they'll go, dude, perfect, I would do that for free. But they can't do that in many cases now because they're working at McDonald's. They don't have any choice because that company no longer exists. And Mr. Secretary, we've talked about this. I hope you'll work with us on trying to refine this rule. I know it mostly falls under labor purview, but it's a ridiculous overextension of federal policy that's really having negative impacts on not just Western lands and families, but frankly on everyone around the country who wants to enjoy those lands. And I didn't ask you a question. I mean, if you have a response to that, I'd be happy to. But we just look forward to working with you in that and continue to try to fix this problem after what's been a frustrating 2 or 3 years.
Well, I am painfully aware of, because I have many friends that are outfitters on that, and I understand the administration is looking at it. I don't know where it is, but I can ask and I'll work with you because it is causing havoc. Some people that, it's short seasons.
Seasonal work, exactly.
And it's tough, and one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same exemption we're asking is that the ski resorts are given, and that, again, seasonal work. And if you would lend your voice to that, we would, of course, appreciate that. The second one is a little harder, and it's, like Mr. Amadei has the sage grouse, Chris Stewart's got the horses. That's because it has such an enormously adverse impact on my state, but it's not just my state, it's frankly the West. And I have a couple of visuals here I'm going to pass around. And again, Mr. Secretary, I know you know this, but it's something that's worth showing. This shows a 26-year history. This is what the range used to look like in my district 26 years ago. Healthy grasses could support wildlife, could support horses. This is what it looks like now. It's just dirt and some sage grass. I got page after page of examples of this. Again, this is what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. It's just dirt because of the overabundance of wild horses. And this is what it leads to, and it's the last thing I'll show. This is a horrible picture, but this is what people need to recognize. This is what it leads to. It's like building a zoo and not feeding the animals, starving them to death. And you have these, otherwise, beautiful animals that you and I both love. I love the fact that you drove into, or shouldn't drive. Actually, you drove a horse. You rode your horse into the office on the first day. I grew up ranching and farming. I love these animals, and we're trying to help these animals. And one last just anecdotal piece of evidence. An individual I know, he's a horseman. He loves these animals as well. He has a 10-year permit, 330 cows he was supposed to be given on this permit. Some years he's given between 30 and 50 permits is all. And instead of for 4 months, it's for 1 month. And it's because this is what his range looks like, because of the horses. And I'm asking not only you, Mr. Secretary, but frankly this committee and Congress to help us solve these problems. I know there are some horse advocates out there, but I'm telling you, if you care about these horses, you can't look at this and say that's okay. You can't have thousands of them starving to death and go, well, that's all right with me. We've got to do better. And if you would give us your thoughts on that, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you. And here's where we sit on the horses. By science, the ranges can accommodate around 22,000 horses or so. That's what the range can sustain. We have 108,000 horses. We have about 42,000 horses in a degree of captivity, which we feed the horses, we pay the vet bills, et cetera. No one loves a horse more than I do. But I am going to host a wild horse seminar in the great state of Nevada, because Nevada has most of the problems, because we have to figure out a path forward. We spend about $80 million a year on the horse program. The birth control part of the horse program has been by and large a failure. You got to shoot the horse twice with a dart. 24 hours trying to find a horse in the woods. The same horse is almost an impossibility.
Yeah, at a cost of several $1,000s per horse, too, by the time you round it up and shoot it, yeah.
And the horses are unique. Some folks look at horse as a pet. Some folks look at horses as livestock, but it's not being managed as either. The horses are this one unique in the burros, are this one unique animal that we just have decided that we're not going to manage, other than captive, put them in a corral and go to feed. So I think we have to have a seminar with all parts, and let's get a plan, because it's unaffordable at $80 million. It's not only unaffordable, it's inhumane to watch horses overpopulate the same ground and starve. And if you've ever seen a horse starve, it is not a pretty picture. And this is what happens when you kick the can down the road long enough, and it becomes a crisis. And so I think we should have a roundtable, include everybody, but let's get a plan on how to manage the population the way it is. And if it was 23,000 or so, it wouldn't be an issue. But 108, and we're not adopting that many. When the adoption program began, it was fairly successful, but I think we went through that, and now we adopt 3,000 or 4,000 horses a year, and the population doubles, I think, every 4 years. But I would love to work with you, but this is a joint issue between the executive, no doubt, and probably all three branches. I've gotten some very creative judgments recently in the courts as we try to even round up the horses. So.
Well, again, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate, and please let us help you with that conference. We'd love to participate. This is going to destroy BLM budgets if we don't get a handle on it. And putting these horses in these dusty pastures where you got hundreds and hundreds of them packed together, that's not a good life for them either. So we can do better. That's the bottom line, and we look forward to working with you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yield back.
Appreciate it. Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being back with us. You have some history representing a very large rural district. Yours was a bit bigger than mine, but I think you probably have a sense that for a lot of the rural communities and for Indian country, this budget has a lot of challenges. And to that end, it was hard to decide what to focus on today. A number of my colleagues addressed some of the issues, whether it be stewardship programs or climate programs or investments in Indian country. So I wanted to just focus on two issues in particular. One, public safety, and secondly, jobs. Let me start on public safety. A couple of years ago, the New Yorker did an article about the Cascadia subduction zone. The article was entitled "The Really Big One," and it suggested that when a significant earthquake hits along the Cascadia subduction zone, it will be absolutely devastating. It could be the biggest natural disaster in the history of our continent. I brought you a map and a copy of the article because I encourage you not to read it at bedtime because it is literally, it has caused me sleepless nights. I'm going to hand that to you if that's all right. And you can see from the map, the district I represent is really ground zero. I guess I'll give you the good news. The good news is that there are really smart people that are working on an earthquake early warning system to give people, time to take cover, to shut down rail systems and power plants, to alert hospitals. So if someone's in the middle of surgery, they can put down the scalpel and secure their patient. To open firehouse doors so first responders can actually get deployed. And we've been making progress on this. In fact, this April, we were able to connect sensors in Washington, Oregon, and California to create actually a unified West Coast network because earthquakes don't know state boundaries. And I honestly don't know how to explain to my constituents why the president's budget zeroes this out. The Seattle Times, in interviewing the folks who are running and working to deploy that system, the headline was, "Trump budget would likely kill West Coast earthquake early warning system." It would shut it down. The experts on this say that if the federal government commitment goes away, this gets shut down. So I'm hoping you can help me understand the rationale for suspending this program, not to mention other hazard monitoring programs like the Advanced Lahar Warning System on Mount Rainier, when there are literally millions of lives at stake.
Well, I also had the University of Oregon, the president talk, and certainly, again, this budget is what it looked like if it balances. Obviously, you had the last say on it. Overall, it makes some very tough choices. It funds the core, and as you know, USGS does a lot of volcanology, and they do sensitive programs on the high side too. So it funds the core, but the expansion in this budget of that program is not. You look at it funds about $54.9 million is in the budget. That's down about $9 million. Not all of it is down from the early warning program, but looking at it, it is. I think it's bare bones on it. But I'll be glad to work with you on it. I understand it's important. Again, my alma mater, the president, came, and certainly that system goes all the way down. Your chairman has talked to me about it, as well expressed his support for that system. Glad to work with you on it.
Thank you. And I thank the chairman for that too. If I can switch gears, I'd like to talk to you about how this proposal would impact jobs in my district and other rural communities across our country. I think everyone at this table knows that national parks aren't just about recreation and enjoyment. They also create a lot of jobs. I'm conscious of that. My grandfather was a road paver and helped pave the road up Hurricane Ridge in the Olympic National Park. Last year, we saw a record number of visitors, 3.3 million, who infused $280 million into the area around Olympic National Park. And it's just a huge economic driver. And you talked with us before about some of the challenges in terms of maintaining existing facilities to support that growth in visitors and to make sure that visitors have a good experience. I think in responding to Ms. Capter, you talked about the maintenance backlog of $11.5 billion. Over half of $1 billion for repairs to parks in my home state. There are more than 60 miles of road in Olympic National Park, and some places have become completely inaccessible due to maintenance issues. Drivers who head down Olympic Hot Springs Road have to navigate a single lane temporary bridge because of washouts. A lot of the visitor centers have aging water and wastewater systems, and they simply can't accommodate visitors. So I know these are concerns that you share. I recently introduced a bill with Will Hurd from Texas to address that maintenance backlog. I think previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have supported creating a dedicated funding stream to address that backlog. I'd love to get your sense, what's this administration's stance on Congress providing a dedicated funding stream to address that maintenance backlog?
Well, I agree with you on the backlog. I've done a couple things. One is that I've tasked internally a review on the best dollars, the most flexible, or the ones at the gate on that. But when about half the parks don't charge at all, it's very inconsistent in what we do charge. A lot of our passes, more or less, are free. Whether or not we're going to take the same or propose the same model that Canada does, U.S. citizens, non-U.S. citizens, does it affect the value, but also does it affect the people that are families that want to have, they don't have a lot of disposable income, because we don't want to make the parks exclusive. We're conscious of that. So we're looking at that. When you drop $15.5 billion in revenue, life's a lot happier when we have money. So we are looking at a revenue stream too, and we're looking at direct revenue to address our infrastructure. Onshore, for instance, or offshore is funds LWCF, but the mechanism of LWCF is it goes into Treasury, and that fund builds up to, it's around $18 billion. Wouldn't it be nice if you could direct some of that into direct infrastructure? On onshore, we basically don't touch.
That's the plan.
So onshore we don't touch, but we don't touch. It's not just oil and gas. And I'm all the above. I don't favor oil and gas over coal, over wind, over nuclear. I'm just all the above because I think being energy independent and in some cases energy dominant is in our best interest as a country. We all want clean, affordable, reliable, abundant energy. But that's part of our royalty look at it too, is that are we getting a value out of royalty, and make a recommendation to you on how to fund our infrastructure. I don't think there's anyone in this committee, anyone on my leadership team that doesn't recognize that our infrastructure affects jobs, our lack of roads when we shut down a road that negatively impacts experience in our parks. And like you, I care that the experience of a park, you drive in, it's going to have the right uniform, the bathrooms are clean, the facilities are great, the trails are marked, and to protect the experience of the park so the next generation holds it in as high as esteem that we do. So, and the experience in the parks also is not just the parks anymore. When you have 330 million visitors through our parks, it's time to look at public property around the parks and make sure those trail systems connect, the wildlife corridors connect, the watersheds make sense. The camping grounds are not just in the park anymore. And the camping grounds, quite frankly, were in the Eisenhower years when most people camped in a tent with a station wagon. The RV business is booming, and people have larger cars. And so our campgrounds have to be reconfigured to what people really use, and not all of it's going to be in the parks. There are some parks that are, Yosemite as an example, if you've ever been there, I was shocked how small Yosemite actually is, the valley. So the experience in Yosemite for many people anymore is an I-5 traffic jam. So now it's time to look at how to move people through. That's probably partnering with somebody who can really think of transporters and that kind of thing. That's an opportunity to make additional income and have someone else run that transportation system. But I'm open I'm going to ask you to work with you because we both care about it enough, but we got to address and have a mechanism to do it. We're not going to make it at $500 million a year on infrastructure. We're not going to make it at 750 when we're 11 and a half behind. So it's going to need to be a national push to address the infrastructure and then put a stream in place so we don't constantly run behind. And again, I'll leave it at this is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. I think the American public demands, rightfully, that we take care of our parks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Amidei.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. I want to publicly thank the ranking member for coming out to Sechin country a couple of months ago to see firsthand what was going on at the horse sorting facility north of Reno and then out into the central area of the state, hunting visually for chickens. The reason that Mr. Stewart, the record should reflect, has horses and I have sage hens is because I got first pick. And so let's just start with that briefly. And I want to thank you for your effort to get together beforehand, but I know schedules are what they are. What I'd like to do is just kind of hit on some areas that we can then schedule before we go through this committee's work to visit with you or your folks that are appropriate for those subject areas. And the first one kind of gets to your deal yesterday. Obviously, I'm concerned about, it sounds like a great idea. We're going to be interested in what the timelines are for that, or generally, or whatever, or if there are none. We're certainly concerned about the focal area establishment, since you've mentioned the courts earlier, and a judge in Nevada who's not exactly known as being in the tank for any side in the issue has referred the focal area finding back because there wasn't any in the process. And so kind of want to talk to your folks about, listen, if we need to protect certain areas more than others, that's fine, but let's talk about what criteria go into that instead of just having that come out between draft and final EIS. Same issue with the mineral entry stuff that's going on. There is on the books in your existing regulations a fairly specific process that provides due process for that, and so the main concern will be, if you're going to follow that, great, but if it's going to be a hurry up thing, then we've obviously got concerns about that. The final thing, Mr. Secretary, on that is, during the previous administration, some of us had challenged your predecessor to, hey, with all this sage hen stuff going on and tasking private owners and states to do their parts in the stuff, you folks hadn't even asked for money. Not, hey, we asked and those jerks in Congress didn't give it to us. And to her credit, she asked for it. And this committee initiated giving her $65 million. And it's like, okay. And the discussion on that, I may need some tune-up on history, but so we followed up on that and said, okay, so how did you do that? What states did it go to, so we can then go to this state and that state and see how you did it? And we got back a document that I'm going to leave with your folks that says of the $65 million, 35.8 stayed in D.C. Now, there may be a real good reason for that, and I'd love to hear it, but when we were talking about, at least at that point in time, was habitat, loss, and fragmentation, all the court orders, all the fish and wildlife stuff, habitat, not numbers, to get a document, I think this is from BLM, but we'll certainly give it to you. So to say that 35 million of it stayed in D.C. is, I'll just pick the word surprising and leave it at that. So those are kind of the three areas on the Sage Hen update that and by the way, you're willing to come to us, I'd love to come there if it's either after lunch or before lunch, because the cafeteria, as you can tell from my figure, at the basement of the Department of Interior building is a great one. So be happy to do that.
For the record, I think you look great.
I'm glad you finally said it publicly instead of on an airline.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move.
What you don't know is that Mr. Simpson's looking for somebody to sit on his other side. Don't tell Mr. Cole. Second thing is kind of an operational thing in terms of, my district has an urban area in it, Western Nevada, Reno Sparks, the Truckee Meadows, that sort of stuff. And so you've got, in the district office there, you've got a fairly active real estate portfolio in terms of governments, right-of-way, stuff like that. And quite frankly, and this maybe gets back to the budget discussion, we've got incidences where people are trying to, we've got a 20-year airport lease that they're being told because there's one person in an office that's slated for 4. And no help on the horizon, because you can't just tap somebody and create a realty specialist. You got to send them to BLM Land University or whatever I think is in Phoenix. But I mean, we've got folks with right-of-way requests that lie within existing right-of-ways that the Bureau has granted to the Department of Transportation to put utilities in there. And the existing grant says, well, it's only for highway. And they're saying, hey, we can't look at that for 2 years. And so you sit there and look at that stuff. And I mean, I can do some more, but I won't take your time up. But I would say that it's something where for routine and things that have categorical exclusions that clearly apply, and they're saying we can't even look at that for 6 months, you're sitting there going, hey, this is a bottleneck. It's not NEPA skirting or anything else like that, but it's something that, quite frankly, we want to talk with your folks about. Now, this is a BLM issue, but to say, hey, we've got to staff these things. I'm not a guy who thinks money's the answer to everything, but quite frankly, when you talk about the budget overall, probably, don't tell anybody I said this, but I'm thinking maybe the last resource administration was Teddy Roosevelt. And so, when we talk about cuts in an area, especially as a Westerner, and I don't have any maps like the Great Lakes people do or pictures like my colleague from Utah, but when you talk about the importance of the majority landowner not being funded to take care of things like grazing or minerals or real estate stuff, it gets to be a point where I think the department is being given a rap that is avoidable when we talk about that stuff. So anyhow, that's one of the areas we'd like to talk about. The other couple real quick are the Federal Register publishing has always been a struggle in terms of when you folks get ready to do an action. You had indicated concerns about the process and that for NOAs to be published, maybe put that down to the state level or something like that. So we'd be interested in seeing how that's going, just because it's something that we've talked about at the federal level. It's sometimes is pretty good, sometimes is not, but it's recurring. And the last one that I would like to put on your radar screen, if I could, Mr. Secretary, is the whole idea of land transfers bills, because the discussion started out with this administration of opposition to wholesale transfer. And it's like, you know what? In my neck of the woods, those people heard that. And so those ideas of saying, hey, we want to transfer a bunch of stuff to the state just because are done, and they're over with. But I have a concern, and especially when a budget seeks to sweep the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act fund, when we talk about budget challenges, where on the one hand, we're happy to take the money from land transfers, transferring half of it to the U.S. Treasury, which is an awful place to put it, that's otherwise available to the department to do good work, resource-related, up and down your jurisdiction, and then to have, for instance, a county lands bill that is supported by the resource community, the sportsman's community, everything else, and get what I think, maybe I'm wrong, was if we come testify, we're going to have to oppose it because of a philosophical issue. I would only say I look forward to that discussion, because just like you mentioned in climate change, where it's like I want this to be based on facts and I want this to be based on science and empirical stuff, I think lands bills ought to be judged on that too, since the history in Nevada is pretty good in terms of bipartisan support and creating wilderness areas and bringing on the sportsman's community and doing the right thing on a scale that is, quite frankly, pretty tiny compared to the federal 56 million acres ownership. The last fact I'll leave you with when we talk about facts, Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act is going to be 20 next year. Some of us think it's the most successful public lands legislation in the history of the West. And obviously that transferred at public auction, completely transparent, from the Bureau of Land Management to private developers, land in and around Las Vegas to allow the Clark County folks to grow and do what they wanted to as they grew. And when we look at that experience and say, oh my God, it's Las Vegas and it's growth and it's all this stuff, and it's like the total transferred in almost 20 years is 68,000 acres. So I would submit to you, in the hot real estate market of Las Vegas, in a state that was one of the top 2 or 3 in growth in the last 20 years in the nation, percentage-wise, if they can absorb 68,000 in 20 years, it is not a threat to the federal ownership picture in the state of Nevada. And by the way, I don't want anybody to lose sight of the fact that that was for value, which, unless it's stripped, creates funding for your department to do some pretty good resource work in areas around that state. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to seeing you, and let me know what color you like. I'll make sure and wear the right color outfit when I get.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Just a couple. On the Southern Nevada public land, there's a balance of $542 million in it. So what was taken is that our projections of what was done. We just did a sale on that 17 parcels. I don't know what the income was on it, but we just did a sale. But the thoughts were that the balance, the balance and the reduction, there's enough money in there historical last 10 years of what has been offered and sold. There's enough balance in there to continue the program. If we're wrong, then I'd love to work with you on it. But that's on that one. I talked to Senator Heller about it, and we just had a release on, I think it was 17 parcels on that. You know, philosophically, up front, I'm just not an advocate for a sale or transfer of public land. But I am an advocate for, there's some good programs on stewardship programs within the Department of Ag. That was a bipartisan effort that transferred to degree management, as long as all parties agreed what that management would look like. I think that's on the table. In some places, you're stacked up on, you have a local management, a state management, and a federal management in the same piece of property. Is that really in the best interest of the country and how you manage the property? So I think that's always an open dialogue. The permit process universally broke from the fact that the Boy Scout troops are not going in wilderness in some places in the monument because the monument permit process doesn't allow more than 11 people to go in. And so and it should be just, for such things of groups going in, if you want to film a documentary, why is it so difficult to get a permit on our filming industry to film documentaries on public property? It should be more or less on a website going in, pay a small fee if you're a Boy Scout troop or you're an organized troop. Where are you going to go so someone knows you're in there? Where are you going to camp? Have you ever done this before? Do you have a compass? These these type of things. We should be able to do that online rather than make it so difficult where a lot of people are being restricted, I think, too much to use our public lands just on the simple permits. Then you get on right away. We did add, by the way, $16 million in it to address some of the right-of-way issues. But you're right, it's just not putting more people behind a desk. If it's a CADEX, then who should be able to sign it off? The lowest level, the office should be able to sign these things off. But I can tell you the policy has been, and there's a lot of frustration, believe me, out on the field. You would think being a park ranger or a superintendent would be the best job ever. among our employees, we're ranked 11 out of 18 departments. In the bureaus, we're ranked about 300 out of 320 or so. This is our employees. So is it because they've just been micromanaged too much? I think we're too short in the field, and we're too heavy in middle management and upper management. But we got to push more resources to the front line, give them the authority. In a lot of cases in these permits, they should just be signed at the local level, especially if they're CADX, and it's a right-of-way issue, they just need to be renewed. Why are they coming up to me?
Yeah, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to be with you. As you and I both know, the class of 2014 in Congress is maybe the best class ever.
With some exceptions.
Yes.
I got kicked out.
That's what I'm wondering, what you did right and I did wrong. Congratulations. Thank you for your love of country. So many people around this table has acknowledged your incredible service to our country, our safety, and thank you for all you have done. And we are very excited about your new capacity. I want to thank you also, like so many around this table have said, about your clear articulation of why the Paris Accord was such a bad deal. I think many, many people, just because of the way it was labeled, because of the way it was sold, it has taken on a different life and perception than reality. And we know in many respects perception is reality. Well, your clarity, this administration's clarity of describing those 20 pages, describing what is and most importantly what is not in it and why it is a bad deal, thank you for the clarity with which you have brought this decision to withdraw. I think it was the right decision, and I thank you and the administration for that. Like so many also around this table, we all have incredible assets in our state. I invite you to come to the National Fish Hatchery. 9.2 million rainbow trout eggs are spawned, started, hatched in the beginning of the process in White Sulphur Springs. We had a devastating flood, a 1,000-year event last June, and the National Fish Hatchery was devastated. But working with Fish and Wildlife, working with highways and other resources, it is back, it is open, and it has a great history to build on the 100-year history that we have already enjoyed since 1902. There still is some funding needs to fully get back into its true capabilities and capacities, and one, invite you to invite this treasure. The eggs from this hatchery go to and are shipped to 26 other federal and state hatcheries around the country. So again, literally millions of rainbow trout start in Little White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The most important also, in addition to the fish hatchery and your continued support, I want to associate myself with the comments from Chairman Rogers relating to the pilot project AML program that I had the honor of working with him, working with Chairman Calvert over these last 2 years. And the Chairman Rogers said in no uncertain terms how he feels about the zeroing out of that program, and I, again, associate myself with his feelings and sentiments, and will fight tooth and nail to make sure that that program continues, and also a proud co-sponsor of the Reclaim Act he talked about. What I would like really for you to give you the opportunity, virtually everybody around this table has described a project, a program, an initiative in their state. And with all the compliments to you and your leadership style and this administration and the new direction that we have from this agency, one of the issues is at the staff level. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about your efforts for a culture change. My frustration with the OSM has been on this AML pilot program, where we had very clear directive from Congress on how that was to be administered, and OSM took it in a 180-degree different route and applied AML standards when we were not dealing with AML funding. It just happened to be used as a entity to administratively handle it, but we got shouldered with all AML criteria when it was not AML funds, simply because we were ran this through the Office of Surface Mining. So my question is, Mr. Secretary, what are you able to do, and what is your process moving forward to take these incredible leadership skills that you have displayed on the battlefield and now bring to this administrative capacity to bring about a culture change where we can get at the staff level the kind of support, the actions that you are demonstrating on the administrative leadership level in this administration?
Well, I agree with you. And the issue is the one size doesn't fit all. From a former SEAL commander, I view much of my job as Interior as just one big command of 70,000 folks divided in different services. By and large, we have good people. And without question, we have great assets. So I'm actually an optimist. But what has occurred over time is every cost-cutting measure has regionalized assets up. So, and a lot of it was, for the right idea. We took scientists out of the field and brought them to the headquarters of USGS. What does that have done? Well, if you're out in the parks and in the States, your scientists are not embedded in the community anymore. And the priorities change. So the priorities have become too DC-centric and not out in the field. So the restructuring and reorganization, we're looking at taking the super regions and about the 6,500 people we have in DC and pushing those assets to smaller units out there. And we think, quite frankly, we think based on watersheds and population, and it's hard to do an ecosystem because there's a lot of variables to it. There's wildlife corridors, there's watersheds, there's terrain, temperature, states. But we've done a map, and we're looking at about 13, we think, of these as you divide the country. But we want to focus more on the efforts in those ecosystems, so we can, when money is given by Congress and it's for a purpose for an area, we want it to be an executable in a priority within an area. Carp is an example. Again, if you're in Nevada, you don't really care about the Asian carp. I mean, because you don't live with it every day. But in that area in the Great Lakes, you care about carp all the time. Same thing with wild horses and burros. If you're in an area, that's what you really care about. And somehow we got to push or get the priority out of DC and focus on a smaller unit so you address the problems that are there. We're a diverse country, we're a large country, we're a great country, but sometimes when it's movements just from DC, again, the one size fits all sometimes doesn't fit everybody. So we're trying to push more of the authority out in the field and redesign Interior. And I guess in a Teddy Roosevelt analogy, the last time Interior really was reorganized was about 100 years ago, when Roosevelt put our park system in place and made some really large changes on how we view public land in the West. I think it's time to have a visionary look at what Interior should be the next 100 years. Think about what Interior should be 100 years from now. Because our public lands, there's going to be continued stress on our public lands, and it's going to change. We have 330 million visitors through just our park system. I surmise it'll probably increase through the period of time. Recreation is going to be a bigger piece of our public lands experience. And we're going to have to coordinate the classes of public lands better so the water systems connect, the sewer systems connect, the wildlife corridors are connected. And wildlife corridors don't just stay in the park. They go out to state land, they go out to private land, they go to sometimes in different jurisdictions, and we're going to have to figure out how to, on the government side, how to be more joint and have the state also at the table early on these projects. So that's what the reorganization is doing. I think that will, and we intend to do it with your help. It will take, some, the power of the secretary. I can reorganize the troops pretty much, but I'm committed to work with you. The funding lines shouldn't really matter because the Forest Service doesn't have to walk over. We just have to, at these JMAs, we just have to have an MOU to work together. But we should have this discussion because it matters to us all to make sure that we go ahead and do it right. Because one can argue the current system isn't working as well as it should.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know that we've been here for a while. I have a couple of questions that maybe I can ask you, maybe a short answer, and then we can submit them for the record. One issue I want to bring up, obviously, is this GAO high-risk program in Indian country. It's a real problem. I hope you take a very close look at that report and get back to us to commit to making these programs one of your top priorities in the department, because this is something that has to be dealt with. The other issue, of course, the Endangered Species Act, we didn't get into that too much, but obviously it hasn't been reauthorized in some time. Obviously, you know the act as well as anybody, and we need to deal with that as far as how what's the future of that. I mentioned payment in lieu of taxes. Obviously, and you mentioned it in your testimony, that's something that's very important in the West, especially. And I want to also double down on what Mr. Kilmer commented on the USGS earthquake early warning system. We've obviously invested a substantial amount of money into that program. California is very concerned about this, and so I am too. I live pretty close to a fault myself, so I certainly care about what we're going to do on that.
How could you not live close to a fault when you're in California?
Faults everywhere. And Mike Simpson wanted me to, and certainly I share this concern on school construction in the BIE. I know I've talked to you privately about this. These schools are literally, some of these schools you can't fix. There's no amount of maintenance you can put in there to make it work. I mean, these schools are just old and decrepit, and some of these tribes, as you know, are very remote and have no resources. And so hope we can work together to find a way that we can find revenue. Maybe, as you know, your experience with DOD, we went through a program in the Department of Defense to rebuild all the schools throughout the Department of Defense. It was very successful. We had a public-private partnership on that program. A little more difficult in Indian country, I know, but if we could use put our minds together, hopefully we can find a solution to this problem, because it's not going to go away. And so I'll submit this record to you also, and we'll get that all to you. And with that, Ms. McCollum, I understand you have a...
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me wish you happy birthday again, and I hope you enjoy your little piece of cake later.
Will, yeah.
I have a couple of comments, and we can move forward with staff. One of the letters that I mentioned when we handed you the list of letters was a letter from Mr. Lujan and I about Bears Ears National Monument, and it addresses tribal sovereignty, and I take you at your word that you want to be respectful of tribal sovereignty. So I look forward to a response from that letter. The other two things I'm going to touch on just briefly and follow up with it is when Secretary of Agriculture Perdue was here, we talked about the BWCA mining threat, and I understand from Secretary Perdue's comments that he had met with you about the issue and that you're looking to have the study go forward and have sound guidance guiding the outcome. I have a few more questions, and I'll submit those for the record to you. And then there's been discussion about uranium mining in the Grand Canyon. And this is an issue that I started working on cleanup in the Grand Canyon when I first came to Congress on the Oversight Committee. And that was bipartisan, bicameral. Mr. Udall's over in the Senate working on it, because the past mining's left polluted sites in Arizona that have been inhabited, that are inhabited by Native Americans. The Navajo were unwillingly let their livestock drink from pools of water that were contaminated, their children playing in mine debris pile sites. There's a lot of concern about that, and a lot of people have died due to kidney and failure. So until we clean that up, I'm very hesitant about looking at doing any more expansion of mining in that area because of legacy pollution that hasn't been addressed yet. And now taxpayers are on the hook for it. And in my area, the Great Lakes Restoration, it is legacy mining from taconite tailings. We've learned a lesson. We don't mine. We don't dump our taconite that way anymore. But it's people cleaning up the pollution from that. So that's kind of where I come from with a lot of the things when I'm talking to you about mining. It's taxpayers on the hook for a legacy cleanup, and I know you've got a big backlog of that we could talk about. And then could you direct me who in the staff that I can work with to understand better what you're doing with climate change? You talked about how you were consolidating things, and then I just heard you talk about how you were trying to take things out of Washington, but let me just give you why I want to know who I should be speaking with. USGS, you reduce, you go from 8 climate centers to 4, so that's more centralization, or maybe it isn't. I need to understand. You're not funding carbon sequestration, that's been cut. You're not funding climate research development, that's sort of Fish and Wildlife. You eliminate funding for the LLCs. You eliminate funding for adaptive strategies. You eliminate funding for science support. Bureau of Land Management, you're a $5 million cut in ecosystem assessments. You do not fund $2 million in adaptation strategies. So I want to understand what was left over that you're consolidating. And I agree with you about having agencies be in the lead. When Mr. Joyce and I worked on the Great Lakes Restorative Initiative for some of the funding on that, we had all the partners at the table, including the White House, and we said, what makes the most sense here? And I had been kind of inclined to think, oh, maybe we should have USGS be in charge, and other people thought it should be the Army Corps. But all of us, when we were done around the table, realized it needed to be Fish and Wildlife working on it, because that's what made the most sense in the Great Lakes region. So I get the idea of what you're talking about how to pull things together. But when I just see all these negative numbers on climate change and the work and the research that needs to be done on it, and I take you at your word that you're going to continue to research and work on it, I need to understand what's going on so that where we can be supportive of one another on these issues, we can be supportive. So, Mr. Chair, thank you, and we'll follow up on that. Thank you so much. You've been just very, very thoughtful and very accommodating with all the questions. So I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you. Ms. Pingree, you have a brief question?
2-second question? Yeah. Well, thank you again. I agree you've put in a lot of time here with the committee this morning, and I will be brief. I want to echo the concerns many of my colleagues have already raised about both the changes to the climate accord, the Paris Accord, and also just the cuts at the department, and ranking member listed them very well. But coming from a state where we have so much coastline, our fishermen are already worried about ocean warming, our residents are worried about inability to get insurance and mortgages on sea level rising, ocean acidification, which hurts our shellfish industry. We just can't walk away from these issues, and the USGS is an important part of the science and the monitoring. And so while I know there's been this talk about consolidating and making sure it all comes, to one place. I think we observe in the president's budget something very different, and that's just everything is cut everywhere, and it's not clear where that consolidation is coming together. So we'll look forward to talking with you more about that. I want to again say I'm very happy that you're coming to Maine. I think you're going to have a great experience visiting our national monument, and I think you'll see that the infrastructure development to make it a good experience for the visitors has already started. I'll send them an email and say, make sure the bathrooms are clean before the secretary gets there.
That
Get your
now
uniforms
precedes me.
pressed. And I think I should warn you, this is black fly season in Maine. I don't know if you have that in Montana, but just come prepared, because we don't want to see you with all kinds of scars and bumps when you come back.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Secretary, as you can tell, this is going to be a challenge. This budget season is going to be a challenge, not just for this committee, for a number of committees that I'm on, but we're going to, and we have a short time, short window here that we have to solve this, and so we're going to be working hard on this committee. We certainly thank you for your time. We are adjourned.